Hey all, welcome to Filmsuck, a Patreon podcast in which we ponder the work of art in the age of crap cinema. If you're listening to us on audio, as usual, we thank you for joining us. If you're watching us on YouTube, just note that this is our first video episode, and we hope it inspires you to like and maybe comment favorably, and definitely subscribe to Filmsuck. I'm Eileen Jones. I'm the co-host who is a film critic at Jacobin Magazine.
And I'm the other co-host, I currently teach in the Department of Film and Media at UC Berkeley.
Mm-hmm. And, maybe we should just say a few words about how weird this is for us to be on camera, and much more challenging and weird, even though everyone else does it and treats it as completely normal. To us, it is not at all. We love the anonymity of being invisible. So this is...
Love recording in my sweats, miss it so much.
Yes. and again, speaking to all you wonderful people out there in the dark, and you can't see it. Right. So now you can see us, and we will weather this as we have weathered many other challenges.
Totally. I mean, y'all, we bought our ring lights. We did a backdrop. Eileen and I dressed independently for today. We did not consult, but we had the same idea since our episodes on Beetlejuice.
So
I mean, that's like a giant
sort of upside down cross. Probably bad and drawing on terrible things.
Yeah, don't invoke the dark side.
My prized possession.
Amazing. Now, does that really contain instructions for how to be recently deceased?
It's only a journal, which I can deface with my inessential writings. But I wish I could think of a better use, and I really should try to get the real one. There was a rumor that somebody actually wrote a real one.
Oh my gosh!
I should try. You probably can't see it, it's too dark in here, but I draped my whole backdrop in crepe, in widow's crepe. But sadly, it's probably lost on you because it's so dark. And I also brought along my ghost mug.
Yes. We can do our little ASMR thing. If you tap on it, you can be like, my ghost mug, my ghost mug, my ghost mug. Okay.
Yeah. We're as ready as we're ever going to be. You haven't explained your poster behind you.
Okay, so I've got Maria Callas as Medea in the back, which is I think the character of Dolores in Beetlejuice is patterned, at least her look. The character played by Monica Bellucci is very much patterned on La Callas. And in fact, you hear Maria Callas in the film, but we'll get there. So
I did not know that. That's already exciting.
Yes, it's great.
Yes, and in general, we are quite excited. We're not alone in this, we realize, but we're quite excited to celebrate the return of Beetlejuice in a belated sequel coming out 36 years after the 1988 original. Just a few notes to mention the plot. Got to do it. It brings back, of course, the old gang that we love and remember fondly. Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice, the high living but undead freelance bioexorcist. Winona Ryder co-stars with him as Lydia Dietz, the former depressed teen who's now a very perplexed middle-aged woman with a TV ghost hunting show, and an alienated daughter of her own named Astrid, who's played by Jenna Ortega, perfectly cast. From Wednesday, she plays the lead in Wednesday. Colonel O'Hara, always wonderful, is back as Lydia's mother, Delia Dietz, daffy, self-centered conceptual artist, who is now hugely successful, even though her art is just as ridiculous as it ever was. So glad to be back with the old gang, because I didn't know how I'd miss them. Quick plot. The Dietz family is reunited in their old house in Winter River, Connecticut by the passing of Charles Dietz, who was once played by Jeffrey Jones, and we see images of Jones, the claymation figure of Jeffrey Jones. He's been very firmly canceled and will not be back and cannot come back for good reasons we're not even going to get into here, so just Google it.
Yep.
If you don't know. But it seems that Charles's death in the movie was hilariously grotesque, and it came to, according to Tim Burton, it came to him in a dream. I don't know that I really believe that, but that's what he claims, how he winds up killing off Charles. It's rendered as a claymation sequence, and that's the kind of freewheeling creative spirit of the old Beetlejuice, which we're very happy to see revived here. Quick spoiler alert, you really should see Beetlejuice before you listen to us describe it in pitiless detail.
Definitely.
Everything, so definitely do. Okay, well, let's just go on to takes. I'm assuming we both loved it, but you need to confirm this for me.
Okay. I loved it, but I don't unequivocally love it. So we might have a slight difference of opinion.
Yes. We welcome
which is
all attacks on our beliefs.
Fertile grounds. Yeah. So I thoroughly, the moment I got there, as soon as the movie started, and the moment I saw that the graphics were like real, I was like, oh my God, this is really the town of like East Corinth, Vermont, or wherever it's filmed, you know, and it has, everything just felt like tangible and not CGI. And I was like, it's a win, folks. I like, my eyeballs were like so grateful. They were massaged. I was like, oh my God, thank Christ. This is not, you know, just like a ridiculous, seamless, computer generated ball of faux Harry Potter. Like, so grateful, so grateful. So visuals, chef's kiss. The pacing was great. I had a smile on my face a lot of the time. I laughed out loud. I thoroughly enjoyed almost every bit of it. There are definitely some like dangling plot things that were bothersome, especially the character of Dolores, who gets this like intense opening scene. She like her putting herself together in a Frankensteinian way is like the part of the second sequence, and it's like really extended, and there's this big buildup. And I kept thinking she was going to have a much bigger payoff than she does, but we'll talk about her a little later. I too loved the casting. I think Jenna Ortega was amazing. Perfect as Winona Ryder's daughter. Petulant, cool, you know, like great look. Definitely could be Lydia's like progeny, you know? So that was awesome. And she was charming. And the whole thing had a very like pre-digital, I mean, we'll get to this too, but if there's a critique, just as in the first one, the first Beetlejuice was very much up against yuppies and condominiums and mall culture of the 80s. This one is very much against like influencers and sort of BS, disingenuous, like manipulation of people through like the wellness industry. Which is great. Worthy targets. I didn't think that the critique of the wellness industry was as like visceral as the critique of the yuppies in the 80s version. But that said, like I loved that the feel of the film was like set up in, you know, contradistinction to the digital world, and it felt so refreshingly real and tangible, you know, even though it's the imagery and the worlds are fanciful. It was like these are things I could grab, and I was like, thank you, feed me. I love Winona with undying devotion, but she seems a little cray. And it is like watching late stage Judy Garland or something, you know, where it's just like, I can't determine the affect. It's so askew, something like normative. And she does spend like a very large amount of time with her eyes just like wide open, in a state of like constant shock. Whereas like the younger Lydia was pretty hip to what was going on and like far less surprised by the world. So, but I think it's maybe just Winona and kind of how she's like evolved as a person and an actor. I do kind of worry that maybe she's unwell, but I don't know. But you know, that all kind of like is also okay. You know, like I accept her. I loved Catherine O'Hara. I don't think she got quite enough to do. And I will say at the end of the day, in the first film, there's like any good horror movie or like childhood film. To me, this was a childhood film. There's like a real strain of melancholy that runs through the first film. And like you're moved by it. You're moved by the ghost couple played by Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. Yeah. And you're moved by their death and the fact that they're like stranded in their home and that outsiders, these yuppies, are taking over their home. You're moved by the plight of like being deceased in a way that I was not moved in this film. And even the relationship between Winona Ryder and her daughter, played by Jenna Ortega, that's the relationship at the center of the film. And I believed it, but I wasn't super moved. But like, maybe that's a me problem, you know? I also thought that the choice to use MacArthur Park, the Richard Harris version, the Donna Summer version plays in the beginning and the ending credits of the film, but they use the Richard Harris like ballady version for this like big set piece at the end. I felt like that was a misstep. It's too slow. You needed one needed the disco version to bring the Deo vibes, the famous, making people sing along to Harry Belafonte in the first version.
Right.
Those are the broad strokes. Eileen, what did you think?
Well, and unfortunately, for the sake of people viewing who like to see a fight here, unfortunately, I agree with you on tons of this. It's not that I have no objections. It's just in the spirit of enjoyment, I hate to even mention them. But yes, there's too much. I think there's too much plottiness. Sometimes I can see they're trying to go in fresh directions, but like the whole boyfriend thing. The Astrid boyfriend, Jeremy, who's played by Arthur Conti, is new, and there's a mystery about him that you find out, and it is very key to the plot as is, but it seems a little, I don't know, it seems somehow sidelined in a way that never gets fully worked back in. I totally agree. I thought there's such a great intro of Monica Bellucci, who looks ever so sensational always. She's 59 and you're just like, good God, woman. That you're thinking it's going to be so big, the confrontation with her ex-husband Beetlejuice. They basically killed each other in a past life, which is hilariously rendered in medieval Spain during plague.
Italy.
Oh, is it Italy? Oh, it's
Italy.
Oh, yeah. What am I saying? It's Italy.
Yeah.
And yes, they they kill each other in spectacular ways, kind of. And you're thinking, oh my God, what a showdown. And it kind of just doesn't happen. And she just winds up wandering around doing this soul sucking thing that she does. And it's just like, okay.
Yeah.
So that was I was a little sad about that. And you're right. The moving payoffs don't quite happen. There's a lot of porousness about death, life.
Yeah.
Which is a lot more complicated. It was complicated in the other one, but it's even more now. But even when there's moments to make it poignant, the movie kind of doesn't. Maybe that was just a choice. So an example, there's a wonderful use of Soul Train.
Oh my God, so good. What a highlight. A highlight.
Big highlight.
Yeah.
Where basically, if you're going permanently into the great beyond, right, you get on the Soul Train. And boy, talk about a joyous way to go. I only hope when my time comes, I get set on the Soul Train.
Yeah.
I can't, we're spoiling everything. So basically, when Delia, who makes a terrible but typically melodramatic misstep, winds up dying. There's much dying, living. You always can seem to come back, but she winds up, meeting up with Charles, and they're both getting on the Soul Train. And I'm like, but wait, isn't that where you don't come back? You're going into a permanent, and nothing is made of it at all. It's just like we're just letting that go. So there's no goodbyes. In fact, she's saying we'll just come back and haunt you to Lydia. And you're like, okay, I guess they just didn't want to go there, or who knows? But I thought, no, that would have been in the older one. There were these poignant little moments where you're like, oh, yes. And you're right about the child melancholy. Certainly, I was sad for myself watching as a young adult the first Beetlejuice, because all I could think is, as a child, this would have been a lifesaver for me. If only it had been here when I was a truly little child. So, I assume they're trying to keep the effervescence going, and they just didn't want to go there, but that might have been a mistake. So, it's not that I don't have quibbles. I also agree with MacArthur Park. They just stayed with it too long. I think they could have pulled it off if they'd limited it and found more, I don't know, more inventive ways to use it. Some of it's lovely. Some of it's quite funny. But it does seem to go on a long time. It's a very slow song. Someone left a cake up in the rain. The one we're talking about. Like, you can't.
But it's great because, just like Deo in the first one, the lyrics are nonsensical.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Deo makes a lot more sense actually than MacArthur Park.
Yeah, Deo makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. It's a perfect haunting song because it's so kitsch,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But and it's wonderful to see Jenna Ortega be so perfect. There's a wonderful lineage that for me, of course, starts with beloved Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
And again, if only she'd been there when I was a child. All I wanted to be was like a member of the Addams family, like Charles Addams' family. And here comes Winona Ryder, and she somehow embodies everything about, if you could embrace that way of life, yes, you'd be alienated, but you'd also be cooler than everybody else. And you just living this kind of darkly splendid, sardonic life all the time, and it would have solved everything for me. But at any rate, I adored her the minute she came on the scene, and then Christina Ricci comes on the scene, and and is right there with her. And now you've got this kind of belated edition of Jenna Ortega, who's chef's kiss perfect.
Yeah.
So that is very heartwarming for me. Those are important figures for girls and young women. They really are, because they just embodied qualities that it seems to me we didn't really have in that combination before.
Definitely
something fresh. So thrilled with the passing the torch to another generation and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So that was fabulous. So certain things I just loved so much that they overwhelmed any quibbles I might have had. And I just felt so determined. It's been a rough go in the movies, for reviewers who have to go see mainstream stuff, and it's just been so much crap. And the summer has been brutal. That finally to come out of the tunnel into the light of Beetlejuice 2 has just been a godsend for me. So very, very happy. And, it's doing so incredibly well that it's made this killer opening weekend. So it's made 110 million. I hate to be all quotey of box office, but I'm just glad.
No, let's rejoice that some piece of garbage didn't earn 100 million. Yeah.
Yes. So it's doing incredibly well. So it's clear that I'm not the only, I don't usually do nostalgia. Mm-hmm. But I was amazed at the nostalgia I felt for Beetlejuice. As soon as I knew it was coming, I was just like, oh my God, the fawning, ridiculous affection I feel. It's just a little new for me. I don't usually feel like there was that much to be nostalgic about in my era. Yeah. But this is one thing.
Well, that's a great, so segue. I mean, I don't know how you felt about this. I appreciated this current version because I don't think it traded heavily on... it did not bank on the audience's nostalgia. I didn't feel, which doesn't mean that one doesn't feel it. Of course, I came home right away and watched the first Beetlejuice, and it was so wonderful and I don't know, soul fulfilling. But do you feel that this current version trades on nostalgia for the first?
I was surprised at how, I'm with you, how little. I mean, very light touch. I mean, Deo has to come back, you feel, in some way, but the way it comes back is so beautiful, even if it's crazy. I mean, Delia is art curating the entire experience of mourning Charles and planning his funeral. So the entire Dietz home is literally draped in crepe in widow's weeds, essentially.
The exterior of that. Yeah.
And by the gravesite is a children's choir singing Deo with heavy emphasis on the line, daylight come and me want to go home. It's such a lovely touch that it's just that's so nice. You just brush it gently and move on. There are little tiny things throughout. At the funeral, there's a hilarious Catherine O'Hara moment where she's like, oh, is that Maxie Dean? Who was played by Robert Goulet in the first version. He was one of the dinner party guests that gets possessed and has to do Deo. And I think she talked to Lydia, who says, no, it's not. And she's like, there's nobody here, and the entire town is there. But by Delia's standards,
nobody's there.
Nobody who matters from New York City is there.
Right. Nobody who's been in Vanity Fair.
Exactly. So nobody's there. Yeah. So it's very light touch, but very true to Delia's character, and just nice little things like that you could not even notice and you wouldn't miss. They're not huge. So that was nice, and you're right, a real determination to keep the tone. Keep so much of the quality, but not to repeat a ton.
Yeah.
It was nice.
It was totally respect. Oh, and I feel remiss for not saying, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Keaton is amazing. Right. Completely, to me, I cannot tell that in that makeup, it doesn't seem like he's aged a day.
Yeah.
The Beetlejuice you know and love.
And he's 73. It's crazy. Yeah.
Stop.
Oh, yeah,
he's 73.
He's 73. Yeah. And I will say this. I did note that he's a little less. He was just so frenetically popping with energy. It was overwhelming, and he's a little less in this. And again, I don't know if it's by design that they just decided not to go for exactly the same.
He's exhausted.
They did. But he's great. It's one of the great characters ever invented, and Michael Keaton was the man for the job.
Totally.
And a huge part of this, the love is just what a cat. I was always such a huge fan of them separately. Michael Keaton, Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, and I went through their whole careers with them, mourning when I felt like they didn't get all the careers that they should have. He's particularly.
Yeah.
Well, he's just a genius, just especially in comedy, of course, and it should have been better. I don't know who to blame. Maybe his own choices, maybe not. I don't care.
Yeah.
Should have been better. And he's still great. I still will seek things out that are quite obscure and watch them just because, well, Michael Keaton's in it. And he's always
Wow.
great. Oh, I love him.
Cool.
And, and I meant to go back to your comments on Winona Ryder. You're very right. There is this kind of slight disturbance now in watching her, and she does spend much of the film and it seems like the role has been designed around that. She's really the kind of the adult who's lost her way in the film and has to refine it. And she does look just startled and lost throughout almost the entire film, sometimes to the point that it does feel concerning, like, are we bleeding over here? Because if you've seen Winona Ryder doing personal appearances, etc., she seems so fragile now and just on a kind of thin edge. You just want to go hug her all the time. I do anyway.
Totally.
Yes, so all respect to her. She's lovely, she's brilliantly talented, and God only knows her life can't have been, for being a movie star, still has got to have been a very constantly disconcerting one. But yes, I certainly did notice that I think they wrote that role to go with that and have Astrid be the younger, tougher, more skeptical, more eye-rolling one, to sort of taking her place in that role. That did seem to be meant. So I think they worked it in, but it is a little disturbing if you also are following Winona Ryder. I used to love Winona Ryder so much, I almost got a tattoo that said so. And then I backed it up.
Whoa, back it up.
You heard it here. I ever almost got a tattoo, and I was going to get a tattoo.
Please describe what the tattoo would look like.
Well, I never did, because Johnny Depp had gotten a Winona Forever tattoo. And it was the inspiration for friends of mine. And they were like, we should all get some variation. We should all get something to pay tribute to Winona Ryder. And of course, that didn't last. And he wound up, having it scraped off and just leaving Wino forever, which is, he fulfilled that prophecy for sure.
Yes.
Anyway, but he meant so much to girls and young women. There was no one who had this attitude. She was so brilliant, and she was like that in life for a very surprisingly long time. I can still remember this interview she gave. It was so priceless. She was being interviewed by some obnoxious journalist, I'm sure, just on one of the endless press junkets she had to do. And she was already a major star as a teenager. And the guy was like, how long are you just trying to ask a challenging question? Are you going to go on just playing essentially the same part of the alienated teen? And she's like, I'm 19 years old. What am I supposed to play? A judge? That is beautiful, Winona Ryder. You are bringing it in life as on screen. I'm a big fan of hers.
Yeah. Good for her. Good for her. Yeah.
She really meant it. She brought something new into ways of playing very young women in the world, that didn't have that terrible feeling of not very bright, but always vulnerable to attack from every direction that you often feel with young women, just the way they're treated in life and on screen. Anyway, that's my rant about Winona Ryder.
Love it. I love it. This is a lot of new information to take in. Yes, Winona Forever, indeed. So she's great, and hopefully she'll keep working and all of this. But there was a kind of disturbing difference to seeing her on screen. It's been there since Stranger Things, and again, I think Stranger Things consciously exploited that quality as well. Exactly. So. Good job, directors, for working with it, but it's off. It's off. But that's okay. Everything's okay in Beetlejuice.
There's some, in addition, there's Justin Theroux is given a rather large role as her off-putting boyfriend, and he's really bringing the whole fakey wellness industry, new age kind of language that's being satirized. He's bringing a lot of it with him. It's okay. It makes sense that this Lydia we're seeing, who's so lost, would have this awful boyfriend.
Yes.
Awful from the beginning.
Yeah.
I didn't love that part, but again, I see why it's there.
Same. It was interesting. Speaking of Winona, she was giving an interview that I saw on YouTube, and she said she had a hard time conceiving of Lydia, having a boyfriend. Yeah. She was like, I always pictured her alone, communing with the spirits. I didn't, and she's, I don't know. So it's almost like, I forgot if she said this or I hallucinated it, but she can imagine her having a daughter, but not a boyfriend.
I read the same interview. Yes, she did.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So they got part of it right anyway. She's doing the communing with spirits, and she seems alone even when she's with him because
Yes, exactly. And it's, again, the film's like the first one, its critique of our current moment is that everyone's got to be hosting something. Hello. Or, participate, whatever one does, like one must commodify, usually through some kind of like audiovisual mediation, So influencers get a grotesque scene in this film, which is great. And so does, but it's like hard to imagine Lydia selling out. It's hard to imagine the Lydia of the first film deciding to be the host of a TV show where she communes with spirits. I guess, again, the boyfriend exists because he's the manipulator that got her into that position in the first place. So he serves like narrative purpose, but it's true. There's an awkward fit about that character where it's like, how our Lydia would fall for this.
You're really having to do a stretch. I mean, Tim Burton is very strongly hinting, and sometimes more than hinting, that one of the strong themes in the film is very personal for him, which is adults who lose their way. And he's as good as said, he had creatively lost his way and gotten lost in Hollywood, which is very, very true. And we'll get into more of that, fitting this into the overall career of Tim Burton, which I also followed very, very closely, perhaps too closely. But that in making this film, he realized, I have to do what I love to get it back. And so he felt doing this, he got it back again. So I think he was feeding some of that into the Lydia character. What if she completely has lost her way? Almost lost the identity that seemed so firm early on. And now she's just wandering around, being, manipulated every which way in a way you never have thought. And, it can happen.
That's so moving.
I have one more tale to tell that maybe I once had a wonderful sighting of Tim Burton. It was in early 90s. I was in Hollywood trying to being part of a group that had made an independent film that was surprisingly getting traction. And we actually hosted a party in Chateau Marmont, which was as splendid as a thing you can ever do.
Yeah,
that was our peak. We never did better than that, frankly. But at any rate, we saw clearly Tim Burton was either staying there or visiting there. He came out with his then girlfriend, Lisa Marie, very stunning model actress. She was in, his early films like Ed Wood. She played Vampira, for example, if you know film. And they got into, if I remember correctly, it was a ultra tricked out purple Volkswagen with faux leopard seats.
Oh my God.
Their hair was goth teased to the sky, and they were both wearing all black, and they looked as happy as two people can look. And I just sat there going, see, it can be done. You can come to Hollywood and do it on your own terms and be okay. As subsequent events turned out, you said that either easier maintained for a short period of time than not.
Yeah,
but
wow, that's a great image.
Exciting. And at the time, it seemed like it was practically a blessing on our success because we were just like, no, see, we'll do it. We'll be able to do it. We didn't do it. We did not do it at all.
That was that 90s moment, right? Of like independent film, like, and it evaporated for everyone, not just for you.
Yes. All of independent film went, rapidly to hell. It was already heading that way when we were in, but we didn't know it yet. Yeah. So anyway, it always seemed very personal. Not only did I love the sensibility, but then this happened and it was like, see, we're all going to do it. It's going to be fabulous. And, it's harder than you think to go up against the entrenched forces of things like the entertainment industry, any industry. Jesus.
I love that reading. I think that's really useful. That makes me love contemporary Lydia even more, thinking of her as a Tim Burton substitute. I think that's great.
As a little stand-in for something that was important to him. Yeah.
And so, like, how would you describe the Tim Burton sensibility? Like, I mean, obviously, it comes from like a lot of sort of energetic schlock horror. There's like a certain optimism to it, like there was in that sort of like late 80s kind of postmodern way. How would you describe his sensibility?
Very much that he's in love with schlock horror, but a very friendly, sunny version of it, which you can also find in schlock TV.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you think of, Bewitched and the Munsters, and, Dark Shadows, which he actually made a movie version of. And there was this whole, he was a very California boy. He was born in Burbank,
Mm-hmm.
He goes to Cal Arts. He's an early gifted guy, though he's a complete oddball, sort of estranged from the culture, of course, but also fits in well enough. He does well at Cal Arts. He's hired. It's practically a pipeline to Disney, which was one of the founders of the school. He goes right into a job at Disney, but he's too weird for Disney. So they find an excuse. It's literally, he worked on The Fox and the Hound, which is famous for being the low point of Disney
Right.
ever. Just like Walt Disney has died, but they're living by a mantra. What would Walt do? And they do exactly what he wouldn't have done, which is no experimentation, nothing. The best quality Disney had. You're always experimenting and pushing forward, and they didn't. So anyway, he's so ill-suited that they figure out how to fire him when he's making one of it. He makes these wonderful short films that start getting attention immediately. The first one is Vincent. It's dedicated to Vincent Price. Mm-hmm. Vincent Price comes and narrates it for him.
Amazing.
Early on, he's just in the embrace of other kinds of talented people who see what he's got. So, people like Vincent Price comes on board. He winds up working with Shelley Duvall for Frankenweenie. She's playing one of the characters. He finds Danny Elfman way, way early. He's a big fan of Oingo Boingo. And
one of the greatest, by the way, like Beetlejuice's score, one of the greatest of all time by Danny Elfman, bar none. Okay.
Absolutely. As soon as you hear that opening theme, you're just like, there, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a very long collaboration. I mean, there's just a long list of people. Pee Wee Herman sees, I think it's Frankenweenie, and it's just like, this is my guy. Mm-hmm. Make my movie, Pee Wee's Big Adventure. So early on, it just seemed like he was right there at the center of a kind of cheerfully odd, super inclusive, able to do irony, but not irony damaged. You could be camp, but it wasn't cruel. It was just an exact nexus of many great things. It was a very particular spot that he held for a surprisingly long time. For me, it culminates in 1994 with what I think is a masterpiece, which is Ed Wood, where he's celebrating, the director of supposedly the worst director of all time, who does Plan 9 from Outer Space. But he's making just Z-budget movies in that lovingly handmade fashion that, of course, Burton can appreciate more than anyone. And it's a celebration of that kind of creativity with your friends and the people you bring together around you who have all their odd qualities and talents, and you're utterly tolerant of each other, and you love each other with a kind of, no holds barred kind of way, kind of acceptance. And it's a lovely continuation of certain things that were happening in things like, if you look at monster movies of the time, they're often, you can read the coding as plain as day. If you couldn't, Bewitched would spell it for you practically. This one is going to be an allegory of race and witches, or this one, of course, is about sexual preference. Almost her entire cast were gay, and it was well known. So is this kind of civil rights era little kind of allegorical pleas for the odd and the eccentric and the nonconformist in a very conformist, very constraining society. You get this, it's not harsh, it's a very sweet way of being satirical about the mainstream that you're in. And by the way, Tim Burton was never smug about that. People would say things like, well, clearly you have it in for, middle-class suburban life. You think it's idiotic. He's like, I can't really. I'm a product of it. I came up out of middle-class suburbs. So it would be completely hypocritical to act as if I'm completely, of course I'm not. But of course I am the way I am because of that upbringing, and it shoved me in certain directions. And so he was very balanced and smart about that kind of thing. So again, a kind of hero of mine for being savvy like that about himself and not trying to present himself as more radical or above it all or anything when he was being given the temptation to do it all the time. So very much a sweet spot that he was able to hit repeatedly in those early years. But the longer he went on, the farther he swung away from this initial, it seems grandiose to call it vision. But it kind of is a vision. It's
totally, 100%. Yeah, a worldview, definitely.
Yeah, you recognize it. You know it as soon as you see it. You know a Burton movie. The problem is with his more recent films, his botched Dark Shadows. his terrible Planet of the Apes, his, like, what are some of his recent with Dumbo.
Well, did he do Willy Wonka? Did I make that up?
Oh, he did the Willy Wonka
Yeah.
remake. It almost looks like it's a Tim Burton imitator who doesn't have the real inspiration, but who's doing a kind of, fifth-rate Tim Burton.
Yeah.
So it's been really heartrending to watch him kind of go down in flames, but it is heartening to have him acknowledge, like, yep, I just seem to have wandered off away from my best qualities. And I'm glad you mentioned the what was being satirized, again, pretty sweetly in this movie. It is clearer in the old movie. Mm-hmm. One thing I love about it, about the two families that are encountering each other in the 88 Beetlejuice. One's, of course, the Dietzes, and we know them. They're the yuppie up-and-comers. Charles is in real estate, and he's just retired from making a real estate fortune. She's a wannabe conceptual artist trying desperately to crash the establishment. All these, notions of being au courant in art and architecture. And of course, it's all loony and crazy and ridiculous. But on the other hand, the Maitlands, as sweet as they are, represent a kind of another kind of yuppie strain. They're the kind of retro conservative. She wears Laura Ashley print dresses. He wears, LL Bean flannel.
Yeah.
A character named Otho, who's their interior decorator.
Deliver me from LL Bean.
Yes, God. What does he say? God save me from LL Bean.
Deliver us from LL Bean, or deliver me from LL Bean. Yeah.
Again, they're so sweet and adorable. It's played by very young Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. You might miss that, yes, they're the ones being put in a predicament that is the more heartfelt one. Mm-hmm. But they both need encounters with ghouls and ghosts and the kind of delightful otherworldly, and they need encounters with each other. Mm-hmm. It's going to make them better. And in the end, they form a kind of composite household family. Mm-hmm. They bring all the dead and undead and everything else comes into their in and out of their home freely, and that's how they create a much better world, this extended world. So I think that's overall kind of his philosophy. Obviously, he's got a visual recognition is very, the high teased hair. It's kind of the camp goth, but again, very sweet, very adorable. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think, what are his other qualities? There's a bunch. He's got people that he likes to cast over and over. Danny DeVito's in this one. Danny DeVito made a big mark in Penguin, playing Penguin in his Batman. Michael Keaton. He's got a little, you could say, a kind of mini stock group of people that he likes to go to over and over. Mm-hmm. Am I missing any key factors?
No, I'm glad you brought up the suburbs. Like, I always thought that was such an important part of his outlook. There's, okay, one could contrast it to the opening of Blue Velvet. Lynch has a much more damning, sinister vision of American life, and Burton shares the same basic sense of there is a hysteria, or can't explain it. There are things that are evil about the suburbs to Tim Burton, but it's not quite the same level of damnation that one sees in Lynch, not the same level of violence.
He's like the very much lighter second cousin. You can see a relationship, but
I think you got it. I think you summed it up.
That's nice. I'm glad you brought up Lynch. That's a good comparison. And both. I loved both. So it was easy to have both in your corner coming up, especially in the horrible 80s.
Yeah.
Well, the 80s are horrible in such unique ways. But anyway, carry on.
Well, so speaking of Lynch, this actually came up for me. I didn't put it in our outline here, but this came up for me in thinking about it. I remember you had a fabulous take on Lynch's most recent Twin Peaks series, The Update, which is that it's all about the digital, and it's all about just the history of changing technology in the last 100 years. And we won't have to go into that. But I was thinking about the relationship of Beetlejuice to the digital. And there are things that I couldn't account for. So we're going to tackle this weird character who Eileen mentioned is kind of unsatisfying narratively. It's the boy who leads Astrid, Lydia's daughter, into a sort of nefarious deal where she's going to give up her life so that he can come back from the dead. It turns out this boy was a murderer in real life. He is played by Arthur Conti, as Eileen said earlier. He looks so much like Gina Davis. I thought they were related. And I wondered, like, is this on purpose? Like, anyway.
Yeah, he's got the big brown eyes, the mop of curled brown curls.
And like the same bone structure, those like, big cheeks, like, I don't know. Anyway, but it's interesting because, this is a character you're not supposed to like, ultimately. He's manipulative. He's a manipulative, evil murderer ghost. But when Jenna Ortega's character Astrid meets him, he's sweet. He's in this tree house, and he's been dead for 23 years. So he lives like he's in the late 90s, early 2000s. And she goes up to his room, and he's got a bunch of LPs. By the way, that's not accurate for someone in the late 90s and early 2000s. Someone young then would have CDs. You would not have, unless you were like super cool, you might have some records, but it's not like now where everyone has LPs. Anyway, he said, I only trust media I can get my hands on. She's like, oh, that's cool. You have all these records. And he's like, yeah, I get them from Goodwill and that kind of stuff. And at first I thought that was going to put him on the side of the good in this film, because this film seems pretty much against, not just, digital media, but also the kind of like, everyone, the way that there's a collapse between consumer and commodity, and the way that we're all commodified and commodifying ourselves in the present moment. And
a perfect example is Delia Dietz saying, I am my art. So she's absurdly huge, and she's like being crucified at her own video installation.
The Human Canvas. That's the name of her art show, right?
That's
perfect.
Right.
It's perfect. Yeah. So, like the movie seems very aware of that process. And I thought this ghost guy was going to be good because he's got a bunch of LPs and he distrusts digital media. What do you think? How do you account for that? Like, I was just like, I don't know. What are they saying about that?
Yeah. And maybe, are they trying to, you're right. You're right. If you're following out what would seem to be the logic, it leads you astray. So it's kind of,
maybe it's just like he's, any sort of fetishist.
Or is it that he knows what to say? He's the manipulator who always knows the line.
Yeah.
That's the line that the good character in this scenario would say. The reading of Dostoevsky is presenting his bona fides. It's later mocked by Beetlejuice when Beetlejuice sort of takes care of him. That's my best guess, is that it's he knows exactly the line to feed.
Yeah.
That would be the line.
I guess you're right. I did love how they made the bad guy one of those guys, the guy who does read Dostoevsky, in public. Boyfriend. Yeah, even though he's not really in public, but if he could be in public, he would read it.
He would. Yes, exactly. So it makes him dangerous that he knows the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess. That's best guess. But it's a little bit, it has moments where it's borderline old codger, speak. So, when there's the whole thing of people on their phones in a wedding scene, and they all get sucked into their phones.
They're influencers, though. They're all there.
They're all influencers. So, you're like, okay, yes, they're infinitely hateable. So sure.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that's an easy victim,
It was an easy one.
Okay, and one more thing along those lines. So the part of the 1988 version that's fun is that the concept that like the afterlife or death is like a bureaucratic waiting room, right? Hilarious, right? Yes. But extremely 20th century in its rendering. Paper, typewriters, even a human behind the desk. I was thinking like, okay, are they going to update the afterlife? Is it going to be like a phone tree and a call center in another country? So I was kind of interested that I don't know where I stand on it, because I get why one would. So for this new version, it's still very 20th century, mid 20th century is what the afterlife looks like. And the bureaucracy still looks like people at desks, which isn't very contemporary, Phones,
Yes, typing. All the shrunken head guys run the call center, Beetlejuice's afterlife call center. They're all wearing those gold Century 21 jackets. Yeah.
But I thought that it might be updated to look like a little bit more, like our present moment, disembodied people on Zoom. That didn't happen. What do you think about the decision to keep the afterlife in the 20th century?
It's a little odd because it's so arbitrary. It's just why does it have to be then and stay then? Why?
Right.
And is it, it's almost like you could say there's a reversion in our country we're always reverting to certain basics as if they stay true. And maybe that's something that seems to stay true. It's almost like, I would have said it was once the 50s. We are forever reverting to the 50s as if that was some sort of norm or truth about American culture, which just, even at that, it's the illusory media-based 50s, the Never Neverland 50s that even now politicians are always harking back to, trying to revive a sense we should all invest in the 50s as some sort of true normal. This does seem more like, what does it look like? Does it look like 70s, 80s, maybe?
Yeah.
So it seemed, but if you remember in the 80s Pomo phase, there was a collapse of 80s and 50s. And it was like Blue Velvet, because 80s had all that retro. Reagan was very much a 50s figure. And it was just like we were going to bring it all. It was Morning in America, and we were going to bring it all back again. So for me, I think it's that zombie quality of like those two eras, either the bracketing of those eras or those two eras that collapse together, that somehow seems to remain at the touchstone for Tim Burton.
Yeah.
When I try and picture him doing a more updated version, I can't even picture what it would look like.
It's hard because the aesthetic itself is, it's all those practical effects.
Absolutely. Which is, absolutely that was one of the rules. It has to be, that Michael Keaton in interviews has said it has to be. Michael Keaton's screen time as Beetlejuice is held to a very small amount. He was only in 17 minutes of the old version. He said I shouldn't be in any more than that. Tim Burton agreed. And they both agreed to keep the homemade practical effects.
Yeah.
To as much as possible avoid CGI.
Yeah.
And you have to say yourself, is it nostalgia? Is it true to, it seems like it's true to is it just the era that they came of age? Is it just true, or is it true to a vision that has to do with an American constant reversion to that I feel like we have? We're always
I like that. That's
a past that's where we were somehow on a track that made sense. Which is, no, if you do
I'll buy that thesis. Yes.
Yeah, that's my best guess. My best guess there.
That's great.
It out there. Again, to me, it's so much about the 80s. My own reaction, I think many people's reaction to Burton was the 80s had a feeling for many people that we were caught in, certainly politically, anyone who was a lefty, who had favored certain political developments, were watching it was just being incinerated. Like it was just being firmly buried for this new era of values that you could see was just rolled over the culture like a tidal wave. And again, evoking we're going to return to what went before. We're going to do moral majority stuff, or it's going to be 50s all over again. And it was just a win. It was just an all-encompassing ideological win at so many levels of power in American culture that you just felt hopeless. Like there's not even a way to think outside this anymore other than to be aware of your own crushed, absolutely marginal status in this culture now. And for who knows how long, an infinity perhaps. So it seemed to me even to have this tiny heartwarming other vision.
All of Burton's freaks.
Yeah.
His beloved freaks.
Like, oh, thank God, just the relief. Just let me have this little interlude in the movies to feel like there's somebody who thinks differently and is operating differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about can we talk about Dolores for the moment?
Yes,
and
please.
The
you
wedding?
Actually have a character with your name.
I do.
How
so
often
excited.
Did that happen in contemporary times?
Not often. And it's usually someone like old and unappealing, like Kathy Bates is Dolores Claiborne, which is at least spelled correctly.
That's right. I know this one is DEL.
Yeah, which is wrong. Like, sorry, it would be DO, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So this is what I thought was coming. So first of all, like she has such a great sequence in the beginning where she's like assembling herself from parts. It's fabulous. We who doesn't like to look at Monica Bellucci? She's so beautiful, you know.
Right.
And in the first Beetlejuice, Lydia listens to the opera Lucia, and there's this aria called Regnava nel Silenzio, where Lucia talks about seeing a ghost, and it's like a ghost of her ancestor, or a ghost of a girl who's murdered by the ancestor of this guy she's supposed to marry. So nice ghosty aria, great, you know. And in that same opera, there's a really famous wedding sequence where Lucia kills her bridegroom, the guy that she doesn't want to marry, and comes down the staircase covered in blood in her wedding dress. Awesome. So at the beginning, you know, I see this Dolores character. I'm remembering there's Lucia in the first one, and then there's this great scene where Dolores grabs a wedding dress from the dry cleaners and she turns it black immediately to put it on, right? But I'm like, oh, that wedding dress is coming back. We're having Lucia covered in blood, you know. And at the funeral of Charles Dietz in Catherine O'Hara's what's her character's name? My goodness.
Delia.
And Delia's like Delia's like mourning shroud covered home. They play Maria Callas singing Regnava nel Silenzio again, that Lucia song. And so at the end, there's a wedding. And like in the first one, Beetlejuice is always trying to marry Lydia, Winona Ryder. And I love that Winona Ryder in interviews has said, I always thought they should get married. One more reason, Winona forever. So, you know, as in the first one, in the second one, inevitably Beetlejuice ends up in his like red tux, like from the 70s. And Winona Ryder ends up in her red wedding dress as she does in the first one. And then like Dolores enters the church and I'm like, well, Lydia's already in the red wedding dress. Where is my wedding sequence going to pay off with this Lucia reference like the whole time? And folks, it never does. And so I really thought they were building to that.
You're right. I'd forgotten about the wedding dress. You're right.
Yeah.
It really does feel, I didn't even forget that, but it really feels like you're heading toward a big climactic confrontation that just doesn't happen.
I thought blood was going to pour. I'm probably thinking of like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, also starring Winona Ryder, where, you know, just like blood comes over the pulpit, you know, and like floods the church. Like that's what I was expecting.
I wonder if something got written out because, you know, it's a very speedy movie. It really is.
And God bless it.
Yes, that's nice. It's only what, 90?
Like 90 minutes, maybe like an hour and 40, something like that, but it's quite short.
But by the standards of today. So who knows? Maybe they just decided to keep it like that and cut something out because it does seem like something was supposed to happen that didn't happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Very much. Especially when you consider the gratuitous gossip of today is that Tim Burton's current girlfriend is Monica Bellucci.
No. Oh, well, that explains a lot.
When I heard my jaw on the ground, I mean, really?
Wow. That's great. Good for them.
Oh my God. I hope they're very happy, but geez, wow.
Yeah, good. I
She's
didn't know
out of his league. And
Monica Bellucci, but yeah.
That's my favorite bit of news coming out of this. Is like, good God.
I love that. That has very like Isabella Rossellini vibes, you know? Yeah.
So no wonder, you know, he feels like he's got a new lease on life. I would too.
Wow, that is great. Thank you for bringing the goss.
Thought I would. That was my important contribution to this discussion. But thank you for bringing the opera, because of course I wouldn't have known any of this, and you know the stuff. So that is great.
Totally.
I had no idea.
Well, I should do a shout out to our Eileen and I just met with our friend Matthew Principe, who's going to have this like new podcast called Op Culture about important mentions of opera in popular culture. So maybe Matthew will be taking up this Lucia Beetlejuice connection.
Yes, and ways that opera is funneled into pop culture. I do hope he deals with my beloved Looney Tune episodes that are, like What's Opera Doc. I trust he must go there.
Yeah,
it's all I ever
Wagner
knew.
and the Viking helmets and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah,
or the Rabbit of Seville. I mean, you gotta hit the classics there.
For sure.
So
Matthew, that's our request.
Yes, the whole episode. Do not stint.
Yeah.
Yes. That's very refreshing because that's not a typical reference point, in most movies. So he must know perfectly well it's going to sail over people's heads and they're not going to get it.
I guess Lydia would have gotten it. So.
Lydia, very much. Oh, Lydia.
Yeah. What I missed a little bit about Astrid that I loved about Lydia, the way the first film treats Lydia is both with tons of love and understanding and affirmation. She's right to be alienated. In so many ways, she is the most level-headed one. In so many ways, she does see the most clearly. But it also treats her adolescent self-indulgence in her sadness and alienation with good humor.
Like and her carefully crafted. She's rewriting her suicide note to get the exact right word.
That's when Lucia is playing when she's writing her suicide note. Yeah.
My favorite.
Crying, artistically letting a tear fall on the page, so great. And I felt that sort of tongue-in-cheek element was missing from Astrid, or the treatment of Astrid. But it's hard because Astrid's sadness is a little more straightforward. She's mourning the death of a parent, and it's hard to be wink wink about that kind of grief. But anyway, it's just something
there's a lot of death that could have been played kind of seriously, which we already kind of said. But there's a brief appearance of the former love of Lydia's and the father of Astrid in the other world. And it's again downplayed and treated very lightly. He fell into a river in Brazil.
He fell into the Amazon.
Into the Amazon.
Yeah.
Right. And he's covered with little piranhas that are wiggling their little tails. Okay. Yeah. The grotesque deaths that you remember from the Afterlife in 88 version. Yeah. Very much present. But it is a little uneasy. You can kind of oh God, there's gonna have to be a serious scene. And they kind of is. Yeah. But again, it's it does seem like Burton didn't know quite how to land on that one because it's
totally it's so right. It's short. That guy gets 3 minutes of screen time. The thing that was hardest for me, I mean, he gets a good hug with his daughter, tells her to have a good life, and that's moving. But Winona Ryder is also there in the afterlife, kind of reunited with her nuclear family, and you get the sense that they were estranged before he died. But they were kind of just there's no moment between them. This is the father of your child. He's in, the underworld. Yeah.
I should say, because poor guy, his name is Santiago Cabrera, and he plays the guy his name's Richard.
Thank you.
So bad. He needs to get his little credit.
He does.
He's very handsome.
Yeah, he is very handsome. And you could see Lydia being with him. I'm okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway.
Yes, you could. So anyway, there's some odd quality. I really would like to see it again. I'm sure I will. Because now I know where the odd things are going to happen and everything. And I don't think they'll distract me. It'll be you didn't quite stick the landing on that one. It's fine. Yeah. And I'll just be able to enjoy the other stuff without the weight. I was just so into it that I'm my God, if this thing sucks, I cannot take it. I cannot take the sucking.
It does not suck.
And it does not suck.
No. It's so enjoyable. You will just be swept along. The pacing, beautiful. Okay, a couple of things left. Maybe ran over too quickly.
Went over a little or ended oddly, but it's okay. There's more momentum to come. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You're in good hands. Again,
you're in good hands.
Say that about a Tim Burton movie. I cannot help but mark. This is wow. This has been a while. I mean, even when he's taken on material that you would think would be right in his wheel, Dark Shadows, God only knows, should have been perfection for him.
I know.
It was one of his weakest movies. I couldn't believe it when I was reviewing it all alone in the theater because nobody went to see that damn thing. It's a horrible failure.
So sad.
And it was terrible. But he did an adaptation of Miss Peregrine's School for Highly Peculiar Children, whatever the name of that bestseller one would have been great. It had Eva Green.
Yeah.
It looked beautiful, and it had some nice early sequences, but it just Elmo just never comes together. The plot just overwhelmed. It's just like, again, and I don't know how well it did, but I don't think super well. It certainly is not going to ever make his list of best films.
Yeah.
So that's what's so weird, is even when it was material, you'd be like, that seems like totally what he would do well.
Yeah.
He hasn't been doing it well. And I just think he's gone through the Hollywood experience where you succeed and you're sitting on bags of money, basically.
Yeah.
And you've got every material thing you ever could have wanted, and you've completely lost touch with your talent. That is like the most common story among the successful in Hollywood that you're ever going to find. So to say that it's a Tim Burton movie that works it's been years. It's just been years.
Yeah.
It feels nice. It's nice.
Go out to the theater and celebrate Tim Burton's comeback.
Return of the prodigal Tim Burton.
Yes. Thank you, Beetlejuice. I feel like Tim Burton might have said Beetlejuice's name 3 times. And then we got I think that called his name in a time of need.
No, that he does keep saying, everyone's now saying it's such a success. What about the sequel? Presumably be called Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. That's
gotta say it 3 times. Yeah.
And he's insisting, no. If he sticks to the current schedule, he'd be over 100, and he doubts medical science will be ready. Have to do it post-death. So yeah, we can't count on that. But who knows what kind of arm twisting will go on now that it's a huge hit. It's dangerous for them to go back, of course.
Yeah.
Probably less is more here, but you never know.
You never know.
You never. And I think, unless I'm wrong, that's it. I think that's it.
That's all we have to say
for our delightful episode that we call Beetlejuice Returns to the Living. Thank you, of course, dear listeners, especially our triple thanks to our subscribers who keep us in Harry Belafonte records. Gotta have a shout out to the old Calypso genius, Harry Belafonte. If you're not a subscriber yet, but you like what you hear, please sign up, give us a like and maybe a comment, and consider signing up with Patreon for all the Filmsuck content instead of just the half that's available to the public. You can follow news of the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And beginning with this episode, there will now be a YouTube version of the publicly available, the half content. And there'll be many Filmsuck shows in short coming your way. And so we hope you join us in 2 weeks for more fantastic Filmsuck conversation and content. Until then, we thank you all for listening and gathering with us to praise the gods, the return of our lost soul, Tim Burton. Okay. Bye, guys.